So welcome everyone. So this is our webinar that is all about how to become a digital illustrator. And so we'll be talking about how to become a professional illustrator and not just a hobby artist. And so we're very excited to talk about this today and teach you all about it. We're going to talk about some tips. We're going to share some artwork. We're going to be looking at some of Eric and Tyler's artwork today. And we're very excited to also take your questions. We have a big Q&A session happening at the end of the presentation. And we're also presenting a little bit of a contest today. So some of you may be joining us because we have a contest going on. So you can enter to win a free portfolio review with one of our mentors. And so if you're interested in that, stay tuned. We'll be sharing a secret word at some point during this webinar that you can use to enter the contest. So stay tuned, pay attention. We'll be checking and keep your ears and eyes peeled for that secret word. So let's get started today. As I said before, welcome. We're very happy to host you today. My name is Maxine Schnepf. I'm the Career Development Manager here at CG Spectrum. And with me today, I have mentors Eric Wilkerson, who is a mentor for digital illustration. And we also have Tyler James, who is our illustration and concept art mentor here at CG Spectrum. I love working with them. I've been chatting with them for quite a while since I first started working here, and I'm really excited to chat with them today about this. So before we get started, I wanted to give you a little bit of information about CG Spectrum if you're not already familiar. So we are an online, fully online and remote animation, visual effects, digital art, and game design school. We offer specialized job-focused training, beginner courses, all the way up to advanced diplomas. So we help people who have never done this before, they've never worked in this industry, and they've maybe never even touched Photoshop in the past, all the way to other people who are trying to upskill. So we work with a lot of people who are already professionals trying to improve themselves or to learn a new skill or learn a new software. So I worked with a lot of students who are at that later part of their life trying to move their way up. And all of our courses are taught by industry mentors like Tyler and Eric in either small online group classes, which have a max of 4 students, or one-on-one private mentorships. We are also a Rookies recognized top ranked school. So if you've heard of the Rookies before, we are one of the top recognized schools recognized by the Rookies. So we're pretty excited about that, to be recognized worldwide by that organization. So I'll get started by introducing myself a little bit. So as I mentioned, my name is Maxine Schnepf. I'm the Career Development Manager here at CG Spectrum College. And so basically my job is to help students get industry ready, and I help students find jobs. That being said, our students are located all over the world. So part of my job is helping people figure out what's going to work for them. There is no cookie cutter approach for all of our students because they're located, as you can see here from the chat, we have people from every single continent. I haven't seen anyone from Antarctica yet, but that's pretty much the only one that we're missing here. And so there isn't one approach for all of our students here. So I help people out in a really personalized way. I also help students by reviewing their resumes and cover letters, their job applications, their portfolios. We talk about what should be in a portfolio, what shouldn't. Obviously, a lot of that information you can get from your mentor as well. And I also host classes, and I host webinars like this every once in a while too, that I love to do. And some of my background is primarily in visual effects. I've also worked in advertising before that. And I have been a VFX producer and also a resources manager more recently at places like Technicolor, Mr. X, and Deluxe Animation. And I've worked on some pretty awesome movies and TV shows like Blade Runner 2049, Spider-Man Homecoming, that one was fun, War of the Planet of the Apes, 3 of the newer Star Wars movies, and a whole bunch of other TV shows. You can find me on IMDb if you Google my name. Next here, we have Eric Wilkerson. Eric, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. So I have been working professionally as an illustrator for the past 20 years now, starting out doing work with fine artists, painting murals, to working for ad agencies, to trading cards, to book covers, to animation studios. Anything that paid and made me happy is where I kind of navigated myself toward. The past few years, I have had the absolute pleasure of being able to work with companies like Scholastic, Marvel, Wizards of the Coast, creating Magic card illustrations, all of the things that I grew up really loving. Reading sci-fi, fantasy books and collecting comics, and to be able to work for those studios, creating content for those companies has been an absolute thrill. And with CG Spectrum, I've been given the opportunity to give back what I've learned in the past 20 years of my career so that people don't stumble along the way like I did, coming up. And I can say, you know what, maybe you shouldn't do this because here's what might happen, if you aren't being, or if you're not passionate about what you do, right? So my whole thing with the school has been about helping students tailor their portfolio to the type of work that they want to get. And that's what I was taught when I was in school. And that's what I focused on when I graduated from college and went out into the workforce. So yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. Thank you, Eric. Always nice to see you around. Next, we have Tyler James. Tyler, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Turn my microphone on here. Hey guys, I'm Tyler. It's good to see everybody. Thanks for joining this webinar here. It's a pleasure to be invited to something like this where I can kind of just have a fun chat about art and share some of my past and experience. So I've been doing this for about 15 years now. Gosh, time really flies. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but yeah, my journey has been diverse. I've done concept art. I was a 3D artist for many years. At one point, I did art direction, and I've done on the side freelance for all kinds of different places, doing illustration work for video games and tabletop games, card games. You'll see on the slide there some of my clients that I've worked with, some of the projects I've been part of. And similar to what Eric said, I love being able to teach here at the school where I can give back and hopefully help the students to avoid some of those stumbling blocks along the way, to try and stress the fundamentals and just kind of help people have a smoother experience. And I think that the school does let us do that, which is really cool. Yeah, I think that pretty much summarizes all of the kind of major points there. I'm sure we'll get into some more details here in some of the future slides.
Yes, absolutely. And both of you brought up such an important point, and I think that's why I'm here as well. And that's why a lot of our other mentors are here, is because we've gotten to a point in our careers where we want to give back. We want to start paying it forward. Maybe, I'm sure both of you had mentors in your life, like professional mentors who you looked up to. I know I did. And so I want to be able to give that to other people who don't. I was actually just talking to some students this morning about how important it is to find those people. And not everyone's lucky enough to have an aunt who works in the industry, or maybe like a brother-in-law or something like that they can reach out to. And that's why schools like this are so important. CG Spectrum, the fact that we do have industry mentors teaching these courses, I think is really special, because not only are we happy, we're getting fulfilled by giving back, and it feels really good for us to do stuff like this, but also the students are getting information from people who are actually working in the industry. They're learning things that we wish we knew when we started. Like, they're learning from our mistakes first, so they don't have to make all those mistakes again. I love that you guys both mentioned that. So let's get started here. Let's talk about how to actually get started as an illustrator. And I actually saw this as one of our questions here. And so let's talk about concept art versus illustration. I think this is a big topic that I talk about with a lot of the students, because there is quite a bit of a difference. So, in your opinion, let's start with Eric. What do you think is the difference between concept art and illustration?
Okay. So what I like to tell my students when they take the intro course or whether they take my advanced illustration course is that a concept artist is really responsible for taking somebody else's text, description, and making that real. You're designing a character, you're designing an environment, props, villains, heroes, weapons, all kinds of stuff individually, right? But that's basically it at that point. I mean, you can go in and put that character in an environment or have that character holding a weapon or whatever it is that they're supposed to be, whatever they're supposed to look like. But then that gets passed on down the pipeline, right, to a 3D modeler or animator or whatever whatever the next stage of that might be.
Mm-hmm.
For an illustrator has to be both a concept artist, a director, a cinematographer, and a painter. Okay, so you not only have to know how to design it and make that character or that environment look cool, but you have to tell me a story. You have to direct the actors, the character, to do something in that scene. Then you have to understand how to light it. Dramatic lighting, cinematic lighting. How do you create a sense of atmosphere and mood in your piece? And then finally, you have to understand how to paint it, put it all together into a package that would then be able to help promote or help sell a product. Because that is the whole point of illustration as a career, is to create content, create an image that helps sell a product. That is the main difference between illustration and fine art, because fine art isn't trying to sell anybody anything. You are painting your personal vision and hoping that people respond to it and say, I think that would look nice above the fireplace.
Yeah, I want that on my wall.
Or on your wall, right? It can mean something to nobody but you. But that illustration for a magic card, for a book cover, for keyframe illustrations for a Marvel movie, just designing what Captain America looks like, the stitching on his clothing, the shield, all of that stuff, the battle damage, all of that, whatever that character looks like, whatever version of the Iron Man armored suit that they have coming out next for whatever movie, that's the concept design stage of it. But when you put Captain America and Iron Man punching each other with like the airport in the background and all kinds of explosions going on and people on the ground injured, you're telling a story. You have lit that scene, you have designed the characters, you are painting that in a way that makes me say, I have to see that movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's illustration.
Yeah. And I think this background actually on this slide that we're showing here on this page is a perfect example of an illustration. A concept art would be showing this hammer that the character is holding separated, and you can see the hammer from every angle. And so somebody else can recreate that in 3D perhaps, or maybe even in real life as like a physical prop. So that happens too sometimes with concept art, is an artist like yourselves will create something and then an actual production designer like on set will be creating a physical thing for that character to hold, or maybe a physical cape for someone to wear, whereas this, it's like we have these characters, we see them here, something is happening, like you're wondering who had them in chains and they're now breaking through the chains. It makes you wonder what happened to these characters, that they're ready to fight.
I'm glad that you picked up on that. And it's that with illustration, you can be very literal, or you can throw in elements of symbolism. And with that particular illustration, it's the cover for book 1 in a series called Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Disney Publishing. And they wanted to represent the actual rift or the temporal portal or whatever it is that causes this boy to travel into another dimension. He's back to back fighting alongside a African American folk hero, John Henry. And he is literally punching through these slave shackles that have now come to life. So they've got claws and like teeth and things like that, but he's punching through that, basically like symbolically punching through those chains of bondage, right? Nothing's holding him back, right? So to have this boxing jab pose back to back with his hero, with all this other stuff going on, that led, that spun off into a whole series of books that I was fortunate enough to work on. And it's like my calling card, really. Like I get invited to guest speak at events or conventions and things like that. And this is the cover that they mention. Like that's what drew their eye.
There's a lot of feeling in this cover. Yeah, it's awesome. But I think you kind of explained it perfectly. Like there's objects and people that you could draw as concepts, but with illustration it's more about telling a story. Absolutely. And so let's move on to talking about how you actually got started. And this is one of the questions here: how to become an illustrator. So Tyler, we'll go to you. Can you give us a little bit of insight into how you actually started? We see you here now, you're a panelist in this webinar, and you're teaching, you're a mentor, and you still have work that you're doing on the side, but how did you start? I'm sure it wasn't that easy. Can you tell us a little bit about your path?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. Definitely a lot of steps along the way. And that's something important to remember, is that it is about finding those logical stepping stones from one place to the next. It is unusual for you to make great leaps. Usually you have to find the next step that is, within reach, right? You can see it and you can get to it safely, and you're slowly ascending, right? And that's the kind of logical way to approach it. There are not these magical shortcuts. Certainly there are optimizations, and having education training will help you get there quicker, but there aren't these sort of magic bullets that will help you skip steps along the way. So one of the things that I really focus on in my classes is the fundamentals, and making sure that people understand things like anatomy and perspective and lighting, right? Those are things that when you're trying to become a professional, if you're missing those core components, those will be glaring issues in your work. Regardless of the narrative you're trying to sell, the story that you're trying to sell, if a person's body looks incorrect or the lighting is not convincing, those are things that will detract from the story you're trying to tell, or the story that your client is trying to tell, right? So when they're trying to imagine you hiring you for a project, they want to see in your work, they want to get that confidence from the work that they're seeing, right? So these are things you really need to make sure that you're focusing on. So for my path, I went to school, went to college, got a degree in actually in animation, funny enough. But it was a more comprehensive degree. There was a lot of life drawing involved and all kinds of other art related classes. And then when I got out, well, actually before I graduated, I had an internship as a concept artist at a game studio. That was sort of my first big break. And it was, I won't lie, it was tough. I was there and I was around all these people who were professionals. They'd been there for years, and here I was brand new, right? I'm the new kid on the block, and it was nerve-wracking, and I didn't make every piece look great. There were a lot of things that were struggles, but that is just part of it, right? You as an artist, you have to sort of become comfortable with this idea that you're going to be continually critical of yourself. And if you ever stop being critical of yourself, that's when you will stop growing, right? If you at some point think, oh, my stuff is amazing, it's all perfect, right? Then your brain is shut off to learning and growing. So you have to kind of accept that reality, embrace that self-criticism, and learn to work with it, right? You've got to sort of Tai Chi the energy into something positive for yourself. And so from there, I went on to do 3D art. And while I was doing 3D art, I was also conceptualizing the characters I was sculpting. And something kind of interesting, and I know, Eric, you can speak to this too, because I see you do these little maquettes and clay and stuff. When I was doing digital sculpting, there was something really cool about exploring forms in 3 dimensions. When you're doing things in 2 dimensions, there's this potential pitfall of hiding from the forms, right? you can iconize things, things become hieroglyphics. But when you have to sculpt with a physical medium, or when you have to digitally sculpt with something, you can't hide from any of those shapes. So I often tell my students, practice drawing, but you can complement that with sculpting as well. And those things actually go hand in hand. They really help each other out. So the reason I mention that is because my time being a 3D artist, that was one of the most valuable things I got out of that, was having to sculpt characters, rotating around and understanding all of the muscles. How do things actually connect together? No vagaries, right? We can't be fudging any of that stuff. We have to know, how did they connect, and that will really help make your illustration work more convincing. So I definitely recommend that. And then from there, I went on to do concept art for other video game studios. I did illustration on the side along the way. And that work came to me because all of the experience that I had, I was putting out work online. My stuff was looking better slowly, right? So these people were noticing, and they had confidence in what I was doing. And also just networking too, right? And I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but make sure you're keeping those connections with everybody, right? Everybody that you meet along the way could be somebody that might refer you to someone else and say, hey, there's this guy I know, and he's pretty cool, and he does some good work. So, keep him in mind, right? So pay attention to that too, right? Don't let your contacts wither and die on you. It's all important.
Mm-hmm. I want to highlight a keyword, or a couple of keywords that you said there. How to get started and how to get yourself out there is fundamentals. So you're not going to get anywhere or get recognized if you don't have your fundamentals really, really solid. And that is something that just takes time. But then the other thing is slowly. You said slowly I started to get myself out there. Slowly people started to come to me. This isn't something that happens overnight, especially in a field like this, illustration and concept art. There's a lot of networking involved, but all of that takes time. That requires you to finish a project. It requires you to work with people. That might take weeks, that might take months. And then they start to remember your name, and then they start to trust you. Trust is everything. And I talk about trust with a lot of students here at CG Spectrum. Nobody's going to trust you with their work if you can't prove a consistent level of quality in your portfolio, or if you haven't worked with other people yet who can then refer you. So you either get referrals from other people, or you can showcase a consistent body of work in your portfolio. But again, that's something that takes time. It happens slowly as you slowly start to add to your portfolio.
And I like that you highlighted the consistent quality.
Yes.
And this is why portfolio review is good too, right? Because unfortunately, directors and leads tend to remember the weaker pieces in the portfolio. So if you have, let's say 8 pieces that are really just, banging, right? They look awesome. And then there's a couple pieces where, that face is a little Picassoed and that leg over there is a little out of place, right? They're going to remember those pieces. So if you have your peers, you have your mentors reviewing that stuff, they'll catch that, right? They'll say, you know what, that piece on there, it's not quite the same as everything else. So let's get rid of that. And so I kind of encourage people to, get those reviews, and, we're offering some here as part of the webinar, so that'll be cool. But yeah, find some trusted mentors and friends who are artists who can give you that feedback. And because it's really hard for you to know yourself sometimes what pieces are your strongest. It sounds weird, right? But you're kind of in a little bit of a vacuum as an artist, so you've got to get those other opinions that can really help you out.
Yeah,
Just
it's
to follow
really
up on
easy.
what Tyler was saying, for students that might not understand, if you have a portfolio that's got 8 to 10 pieces in it and you think they're all amazing, and there's a lack of consistency that you're not aware of visually, and an art director, you show your portfolio to an art director and they see those 2 or 3 pieces that are just awful, they're going to be concerned because it's their job on the line as well. If they hire you and you are showing something that is not consistent with the 8 other pieces in your portfolio, they don't know which version of you they're going to get. And they also need to be aware of how long it took you to do those pieces. If each of those illustrations or whatever it is that you're showing took you 3 months to do, and they give you a month or 3 weeks to do it in, you're going to freak out. So, and then they're going to get that poor quality because you're going to rush through it. So having a consistent portfolio, having the speed and the confidence. And I stress that a lot with my students, confidence, because there's so many of them are stuck in their own head about, I don't know if I should do this. I don't know if I should do that. I don't, they're just circling the drain in their own head constantly. And I'm sure you speak to many of them.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah.
Yeah. But I tell them, having that confidence, you need a couple of confidence boosters. And for some of my students, I help them push through that barrier and find out what it is they really truly like to paint. And I tell them, do more of that, but do it better.
And to speak to that too, in my classes, it's the same thing where it's not just pointing out that, this finger is too long or that foot is out of place, right? It's the psychology of the artist and that fear when you're new. That's something that we definitely talk about. And you need to speak to that with students because they are nervous about everything, basically, right? They're nervous about their work. They're nervous about their future, their career. So as mentors, and this was new for me, to be honest, when I became a mentor, because my background is, of course, making professional art. It's not in necessarily coaching people emotionally, right? So as I've been a mentor for a while, that's something that I've been getting better at is speaking to the sort of psychology of the students. And it's something we do care about here at the school. It's a critical part of becoming successful.
Yeah. And both of you guys, so I'm going to tell a little bit of a quick story here. And this kind of goes into this idea, this next topic here about a day in the life of a professional digital illustrator. So earlier this week, I had a call with a student. I'm not going to name them, but I had a call with a student who recently graduated and they just got their first freelancer gig. And they had a couple of, compared to what they have put in their portfolio, this should have been easy. It was a small model. It wasn't an illustration, but it was a modeler. And they had to make a couple of different variations of a certain model. And he called me this week and he said, Maxine, like I'm struggling. This should be easy for me, but I can't do it. And he started freaking out a little bit. And he's like, well, this is just one little freelance gig. If I struggle to do this, is this what it's going to be like when I start at a studio? Am I going to show up to my first job and flounder? And two things. First of all, you're not the only one that feels that way. Everyone feels that way. But another important thing, and this is why I love CG Spectrum and our community so much, is that you're not alone. If you're struggling with something, there are so many people in our community here you could talk to. You could reach out to your mentor and say, hey, could you help me with this? Like, how would you approach this project? Obviously, if certain parts of it are secret, you can just chat with them. You don't have to show them, but depending on any NDAs you might be under, but you're not alone in this. And I talk about this in our new student orientation as well. If you're someone who works at a studio, you're not sitting in your own isolated box all day. You have people sitting around you that you can say, hey, Eric, can you take a look at this? I think something's broken, or do you have any tips? Like I'm hitting a wall, I have writer's block, or creative block, something like that. And so you're not alone in this feeling. And I'm going to also call you both out a little bit because I've talked to both of you. I've done a webinar with Eric in the past, and I've talked to Tyler before. Both of you have both expressed those same feelings. I've heard Eric, on one of his live streams be painting something, and he was like, oh, I bet Brandon could paint this eye faster than me. Even at that senior level, you guys are amazing artists that people are looking up to. You're a panelist in this webinar today. You're teaching other students. And yet, even in your heads, you're like, I'm not good enough today, or you still have those doubts, like they don't go away. And like, even you, Tyler, you're sharing your work with me one day. And you're like, look at this artist though. You're sharing other artists that you look up to with me. Right.
Yeah.
And
there's always the artists that you feel are just at such a different tier. Right.
Exactly.
But that's good though, because it's good
not
to
something
have
that goes
those
away.
it never goes away. And
Yeah.
those people that you look up to continue to guide you and push you, right? So don't work in a vacuum. Have those pieces nearby, and those will help you out of those spots, right? Yeah, and just speaking about the fears, right? It's you know, I actually don't I don't even know about that instance with Eric and the eye thing, right? But like just to pretend to be in Eric's head for a second, it's like, you know, Eric may have a thing where he's like, I'm slow at painting eyes, right? Or for me, it's like I get the symmetry on faces wrong sometimes, right? And we all have these things, and so it becomes kind of bloated in our head, right? It's like it may not actually be that big of an issue, but it's okay because then we focus on it, right? We realize it could be something, so we kind of, you know, hone in on that and smooth it out. You know, there's just so many areas to potentially hit, and you've got to just tackle one at a time, right? Maybe it's, I don't know the anatomy of the forearm very well. Okay, well then let's do some studies, right? Let's get in there and figure it out, so that way we don't have that fear. And it's never ending. That's the thing to remember. It doesn't stop. You'll never
find a
feel
new
like you've
fear.
mastered
Well,
everything.
it can. Well, I don't want to freak anybody out because they're like
Yeah.
watching this going, oh my God, am I going to be afraid of every job I ever do? It's
No, you will get better.
So for those of you watching, the term is referred to as imposter syndrome. Everybody has it. It's not just an art thing. It's a human thing. Do I belong in this space? There are so many people better than me. How did I get here? Why should I feel like I deserve this moment in time? Right? And the only way to overcome that feeling and do the work is to just do it. And when it's done, when it's finished, that's a confidence booster. And then you say, you know what? It might not be perfect, but it's finished and people are happy with the result. And that quiets that voice in your brain going, you suck. You don't need that all the time. And I see it with tennis players, professional tennis players, professional athletes. You know, I can't even imagine what's going through the mind of an Olympic athlete. You know, when you see somebody do something unbelievable that very few human beings on the planet could ever do or ever dream to do, and you're up there with them and you have to get gold. You know, you've come there for one of 3 medals. That's it. You go home empty-handed, and that's gonna mess with you. But on an artistic level, it's all about pushing through and building that confidence. The more confident you are, the stronger your artwork becomes, the more that negative, toxic voice in your head will quiet. And then you will get to a point in your career, hopefully, where a big project comes along that pays you a lot of money or that wants to pay you a lot of money. And you say, no, imposter syndrome, go sit down. They called me. I didn't show my portfolio to them. I didn't reach out to them. They contacted me for a reason. And I'm going to show them why they contacted me. That's where you ultimately want to be.
And when you see your work published, it's a huge boost, right? When you open up a book or you see the cover of a book, right? It's like, I made that. That's a huge thing. And you would never have done that if you didn't just try and you weren't okay making mistakes. You have to be okay with making mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes are things only you notice. That's the other thing too, is that what you might be paranoid about is something that nobody else will even notice. So it's important to kind of keep that in check too, right? Like there's things that bug me about all of my pieces, and a lot of them, no one would probably ever know those things, right? It's just about keeping that voice at a reasonable level in your head.
Absolutely. Like if you have a client or a supervisor, let them give you the feedback, and they'll point out what they need to point out, and then you fix those things. But you don't have to point out the things that are wrong with your own work. You fix those on your own time, or, you know, maybe you make a mental note to say, oh, I got to work on this anatomy, or I got to work on this on my own time, so that next time it comes up, I can do better next time. So
and having a clear goal for your work too, because I think sometimes what happens is you try to do too many things with one piece, and that's where you can feel like there's a mistake there. And so you've got to just be laser focused on achieving one goal. And I tell the students to, make some notes. Don't just let it be an image. Write things down about what you're trying to achieve with the piece. And when you're finished with the piece, do a post-mortem, right? Make some notes about what worked, what didn't work. Because to be a professional at anything, you have to be obsessive about it, right? Like there's those people that are at the top of their game, as Eric was saying about Olympians, right? Think about how much those people are training every day to be at that level, right? We would describe them as being obsessive about that thing. So you can't be a professional unless you're obsessed. And part of being obsessed is about checking all of the little things, right? Really assessing the process and analyzing how other people are doing things. You can't remember all that stuff. So write stuff down. That's a huge human limitation, is our memory. And with some of those things that we learn, especially things that are fresh, are fleeting, right? They kind of wither and disappear on us quickly. So when you find new information, write it down, try and capture it, try and overcome the human limitation, right? Be aware of them so that you can work around them.
Mm-hmm. And you can use that like as a little tip here, to be a professional, thinking about the day in the life of a professional, whether it's digital illustration or really any other creative field, or even a less creative field like what I've done in the past with more production related roles. When you write stuff down, use that as your task list, use that as your to-do list for that day or for that project to say, okay, I want to hit these goals. And maybe some of those goals can be broken up into more discrete or specific tasks. If I want to make the character look brighter, the scene to look brighter, like what steps do I need to take to make that happen, and start to spell it out for yourself. I think time management is one of the most common topics that I talk about with students, and I'm sure you experience it in your classes and even as professionals. Like, you have to manage your own time as an illustrator, because if you can't keep track of the time, then you might not get paid, or you might not get paid in time, or you might not hit that deadline, and then that client won't trust you again in the future. You can't hold on to that trust that you've worked so hard to build and gain. One bad project can make you lose a client. It's so important. And time is really the most important thing. And I mean, I have a producer background, so obviously everything is time related for me.
Sure. I was going to mention something else too. This kind of professional mentality, it's not just when you have a client, right? When you're doing your own personal work, it's no different. Treat that with the same kind of respect. And in fact, your personal stuff is maybe the most important place to be laser focused on being professional, because that's your opportunity to kind of break new ground and experiment, right? It's even more safe to fail in that personal space. So yeah, you don't have to, flip that switch on and off, right? You should kind of maintain that sense of professionalism and tracking how you're doing things. Just maximize value. If you're going to spend 3 hours painting something, try to get as much out of it as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So next, we're going to talk a little bit more about going pro. So, Eric, what are your thoughts on this? What do you do, and maybe what not to do, if you want to go from amateur to pro? Can you give us a little bit about your background? Like, how did you make that jump from amateur hobby, drawing, to getting your first job?
Okay. Well, I studied at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, and their whole, similar to CG Spectrum, the way they advertised the school is by saying that they had working professional artists teaching courses. So you weren't studying with somebody that used to be an illustrator 20, 30 years ago and is telling you how things used to be back in the 70s. You're dealing with an instructor, a mentor that as soon as your class is over, they're running back home because they're still on the clock for their deadline, and they're actively finishing concept designs, book covers, whatever it is, whatever type of artwork they make, in addition to teaching classes. So I had working professional illustrators. Once I figured out what direction I wanted to take in art school, that I wanted to do, because I came in to art school thinking I wanted to do comic book art, like be a penciler, like, and work for Marvel, be like Jim Lee or Rob Liefeld or something like that. But then I realized I don't want to do sequential art. This just looks exhausting to me. I just want to do one image and get paid for it. And somebody said, well, then that's illustration. Well, you can just go into that department. And that's where I was really always where I wanted to be, because I was making illustrations as a kid, but didn't know what the word was, what you called it, right?
I remember that too. I did that too. I called it like cartoonism or something.
Yeah, I would do my concept design of a character, then I would do a full-blown illustration of that character, like holding little kids and leaping out of an exploding building or something like that. That was me when I was in high school, like drawing that stuff. I just didn't know what to call it. It was my drawing. But going into art school and then finding out that there are world-class, sci-fi fantasy illustrators out there doing book covers and trading cards and album covers and stuff for movies and all that stuff. They're all over the place. I said, I want to learn from those people. So I took classes with them, and they kind of honed what was already there in my portfolio and said, okay, well, this is what you need to do to improve. And everything that they said, every word that came out of their mouths, I wrote down, which became the basis for my video content lecture for my illustration class. It's basically notes from my college years, just like recorded. But I studied with, award-winning people that were doing what I wanted to do, and they guided me along the way. And when I got out of school, I was not an instant rock star. That's 2%, maybe less than that, of every art school, produces instant rock stars. They're working before they ever even graduate. The other 98% have to put in that work. They have to work on their portfolio. They have to figure out for themselves what it is they like to do. Right. And half of that 98% won't ever even go into whatever it is that they went to school for, whether it's animation, 3D modeling, whatever art career that they paid money for, they won't do. So you're only really dealing with that other half that are almost good enough to compete, but they're going to keep trying. They're going to keep spending the time. It's going to be a slow journey, but they're going to keep building up their portfolio and figuring themselves out and figuring out what it is they're passionate about. And then they're going to make it happen. So for me, I ended up working for animation, working for an ad agency, doing portraiture and stuff like that for TV commercials. And it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, but it was paid and allowed me to move out of my parents' house, and showed my parents that I didn't waste 4 years of their money, which was, for me, priority number one was just to show them that I didn't waste their time or their money. But while I was doing that staff illustration job, I was also working on building up my portfolio, strengthening my skills for the type of stuff that I wanted to get, which was sci-fi fantasy book cover art. And I started going to conventions. Depending on where you are in the world, they might not have these kind of conventions, or you might have to travel, save up some airfare and travel to something like that. But I went to conventions where other people that wanted to get the same kind of work that I wanted were all showing their portfolios in the art show. And we knew that art directors were walking the halls. We didn't know who they were, what they looked like, because this is, Facebook is in its infancy, and, you don't really know who what these art directors, the creative directors look like, but they're walking around, they're taking notes, taking postcards from people's tables. And that networking experience was the start of my career, because I had an art director see my work and trust that I was the person for the next series that they were going to be commissioning illustrations for. And that giving me just that taste of what it was like to be a book cover illustrator was an absolute thrill. And I said, I need to do this all the time now. So when that book hit shelves, then I, sought more of that. And it was a slow build, but, it eventually got to a point where I'm turning down stuff because I can't fit it into my schedule. But it's all about figuring out, for me, it was all about figuring out what it is I'm passionate about. Because every time I tried to apply to some studio job that just said digital illustrator wanted, if it was for like race car games or something like that, something I had no care for whatsoever, I knew at some point in time I was going to quit or get fired. One of the two was going to happen within maybe a 3-year time span where I just go, I can't do this anymore. So I had a couple of those experiences where I just said, oh my God, it's paying this much? Oh, apply. And I would get those jobs and realize very quickly, I hate this. But now I have an apartment and a car and a girlfriend and all the, like, I can't leave this. But, for many people watching, you might be in another country where you say to yourself, I want this as a career. I want that studio job working for ILM or some fancy video game studio, but my family is all here. I can't leave my family. I don't want to leave my family. And that's what it was for me. I wasn't lucky enough. I always think of it that way. I wasn't lucky enough to have been born and raised or live in California or Texas or where some of these game studios and film studios were, because that's like a bulk of that industry is all in one sliver of the country. I was in New York, and all of the game studios that were in New York were leaving New York City because the rent was too high. The commercial real estate was too high. So they were going to Canada, Texas, Florida, and I had a sick mother. I had all of my family was all around me. I said, I can't abandon them for this dream gig. I have to figure out what it is I'm passionate about and make that work. And that's what I ended up happening. And that's why I'm sitting here today.
I've been like furiously taking notes this whole time because I just want to give all of the people watching some more distinct points, because these are some of the questions that we're getting to. So, to be a professional illustrator, some things that you should be doing are building your portfolio. You should also be networking and surrounding yourself with other professional people. So whether that is joining webinars like this, especially if you're in a country that, maybe doesn't have those events or those studios, luckily, and it's one of the few silver linings of the pandemic is that a lot of this stuff is happening online now. So you have access to this information and to these people. All of our students here at CG Spectrum have access to these professional people within our community. So it's amazing. But networking and surrounding yourself with information and people is really important. Also treating those personal projects, until you get your first paid gig, treat those personal projects like paid gigs. It gets you in the right mindset. It gets you into thinking about what it's like to be a professional. If you give yourself timelines, if you give yourself a schedule and a brief to work to, it makes you act more professional. I don't really like the term fake it till you make it, but there is some validity in that. It does help to start thinking like a professional if you want your portfolio to start looking like a professional portfolio. Another thing is, I think the biggest one here is figuring out your passion, figuring out your focus, and your personal style, and then do a little bit of research and find companies that fit that style. You'll do much better in your application. You'll get a lot more callbacks if your style fits the style of that company. You know, I make this analogy all the time with students, but if you want to apply to Pixar and your work is really dark and you do a lot of horror work and it looks really evil and there's a lot of demons and stuff like that, you could be the best artist in the world, but if there's someone else who might be maybe just a little bit worse than you, but they're making cute, colorful characters that really fit that Pixar universe, they're probably going to go with that person because they know that, you know, with time they'll improve and be just as good as you, but their style fits. And so but that being said, you also have to remember your personal situation, you know, whether you have family that you have to stay with, or maybe you are willing to move, maybe not. There's so many different personal characteristics about everyone's life that really dictates what kind of jobs you can even look for. You know, Eric's like, oh, I grew up in New York and I wish I was in the West Coast. I'm sure there's people in the world that wish they're in New York, you know, because maybe the companies they like are all in New York. You know, the grass is always greener, but you really have to think about your personal situation and, you know, think about what's realistic. Like, what can I realistically do right now? Maybe I need to look in my local area and pick up one of those jobs that I'm, you know, is not a dream job maybe, but it gets paid, it puts food on the table, it allows you to pay your bills. And so you can financially, you know, be safe. And then you work on those passion projects and eventually work your way up to those dream jobs, and then eventually work your way up to those bigger studios that you really want to work for, you know. But it's a stepping stone for sure. Let's talk a little bit about finding clients. I get a lot of students asking me about this. Tyler, what do you do to find paying clients, and how do you keep them?
Sure, it's a good question.
It's a really good question.
So it's kind of two things, right? One is people will find you if you're doing great work, but on the other side, you need to be reaching out, right? So it's a combination of those two things. And at the beginning, it's going to be more about reaching out, and it could be just through the work itself is a way to reach out, right? You could email people and show them what you're doing and say, hey, you know, this is where my portfolio's at. I'd love to help you guys out. Let me know. Add me to your list of freelancers. And if your work is of the right fit, they'll get in touch, right? You know, just to not to circle totally back, but we were talking about conventions and booths and things and getting that networking going. As an art director for Hex, I can tell you that I would walk convention floors and I would find artists for Hex that way. So, you know, it's definitely a thing, and you know, it wasn't always super fruitful because everybody's kind of new in those places, but you never know what you're going to find. So those are great opportunities. The people that you go to school with are great opportunities to find work, right? They might. This happened to me where I was in college, and that concept internship that I got while I was still a senior in college was through a friend of mine who graduated a little earlier than me, who ended up becoming a 3D modeler at a studio. And I said, hey, here's my stuff on a CD. I'm dating myself, right? Here's my stuff on a CD. Can you hand this to somebody there and just let them know that I'd love to, you know, do some work for you guys? And that was how I got that first little chance. And then everything kind of snowballs, right? Because then that's a hit on your resume and it all builds. So I guess the kind of main thing to think about there is don't write off any avenue, right? Keep those avenues open. There's nothing that's hurting you to keep those things open. Friends, people you go to school with, mentors that you have, sending emails and putting your work out there. You know, having your work represented on, there's so many of these cool portfolio websites now. You don't even have to be paying for your own website. Eventually you can, but make use of some of these free resources, right? I won't mention any specifics, but I'm sure you guys watching know about these sites, right? And it's a great way to start having people notice what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not easy. It's hard. There's a lot of work. There's all these little steps you can take. You know, one of our students watching mentioned this. Maxine opened my eyes to Brazilian studios and opportunities, and now my heart is way lighter. because yeah, that's a question we get all the time, is all of these students and all these people around the world, I'm sure a lot of people watching right now can relate. They're saying, well, Tyler and Eric are both in the US, and it doesn't matter where you are, East Coast, West Coast, at least you're in the US. What can I do? I'm in Brazil, or I'm in Ukraine, and these people are coming to me saying like, there's no studios here. They'll tell me very, very confidently that there are 0 studios for them to work at in their country. And in some cases, maybe there are no major studios. Maybe Ubisoft doesn't exist there yet, or EA or Blizzard or something like that, or a big, VFX studio like MPC maybe doesn't exist there yet. But there are so many other ways to make money for your art. There's so many other ways to get yourself out there locally. After COVID, there's a lot of businesses struggling, for example, that might need help marketing their shop or marketing their restaurant. Maybe there's some illustration work you can do for a friend who owns their own business. There are so many ways to get yourself out there and to create work for your portfolio. Paid work, ideally, or even unpaid at first, just to help a friend or to help a struggling business that's in your hometown.
I did free stuff at first.
Sports, yeah, free stuff. Like, can we raise our hands if we've done any free work before? I'm not happy about it, but
yeah,
but you've done it, and sometimes that helps you make that next step.
It's a resume hit, right?
Exactly.
You can say, I did something that was part of a bigger project. I was able to work with other people to attain something larger, right? So you always want to be weighing that equation, right? Sometimes you might take a little less money because it's something super cool, right? That's definitely a question that you'll have to answer sometimes.
So let's take Marvel Studios, for example, because that's like the gold top shelf for, I imagine, for a concept artist or anybody looking to do film illustration for blockbuster stuff. Outside of the core group of maybe 5 to 10 concept artists and production designers that work on site at their Disney campus in California, everybody else is remote, and that's pre-pandemic, right? So a friend of mine, an online acquaintance of mine that actually is a graduate from my college. He had been posting like fan art and stuff like that on social media and on Instagram, and building up quite a huge following. And his stuff got recognized by Marvel Studios. And just maybe 2 years ago, he started doing comic book covers for Marvel, which caught the attention of Marvel Studios, and he ended up doing concept design work for their new series on Disney Plus, the What If series on Disney Plus, if you guys are familiar with that. And
I remember that.
He's so stoked because he didn't have to leave New York City. He's still in Brooklyn. He's still doing his thing. He didn't have to relocate anywhere. And I also see posts online from people in the Ukraine or in Poland or something. I'm like, Poland? How is somebody from Poland working for Marvel Studios? It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter. And this is all pre-pandemic. It doesn't matter. If you're good and you're putting your work out there consistently, I tell students, hashtagging the crap out of it. And if you've got a network out there that says, yo, check this out, and they're tagging you, and they've got 100,000 followers and you've got 5,000, and they tag their audience, even if with the algorithms, that 100,000 followers, only 10% of that audience is actually seeing it, but that's still 10,000 more people, more eyes on your work than you would have had. And if even one of those eyes works at Marvel Studios, you got somebody on their way to work that goes, oh, hey, Kevin, check this out. Is this kind of what you're looking for? Yes, call that person immediately. Done.
Yeah.
Done. That has started your career.
Quick. Yeah. Like I've been in meetings with producers like that who like where we would like share concept artists, be like, oh, you know what, we need to get one of our internal artists to do this. And then she would be sending me links to concept artists that like she follows and so, and then like I'm like, oh, I really like this person, I want to follow them. Like I think some of them I've even gotten hired here as mentors because I'm like, I remember someone shared this with me and I trust that they're good, right? But that stuff happens all the time. But I think the bottom line here is when it comes to going pro and how to find clients, how to network and do all of these steps that we're talking about, you need a strong portfolio first. Nobody is going to share your work if you don't have something cool to share.
That's
If you
the
don't have
minimum entry
something-
bar right there.
Yeah,
It's got to look good.
But what I
Yeah.
like to tell students as well is that it's not just in today's environment. And I see a question here about what is your opinion on social media presence? Is it useful to post art on Twitter and Instagram? So I'm going to tell you my personal experience with this, in addition to what I just told you about my friend Josh that is working with Marvel Studios now. Part of the reason that I am sitting here today talking to you all is because I painted something for myself. I painted a personal illustration that of something I hadn't seen out there in the world. And I just wanted to paint it and just put it out there and just, you know, go back to life, go back to whatever it is I was doing. I put it on Facebook, then I put it on Instagram. People responded to it almost immediately and started sharing it on Instagram. Then they started sharing it on Facebook, thousands and thousands of times across both platforms. Enough so that I get a phone call somewhere in the middle of August in 2018 by my now agent who said, hey, we saw your work online. We saw your work on Twitter. We are interested in wanting to know if you're interested in representation, you know, for the kind of work that you want to do, sci-fi fantasy art. And I said, wow, that's amazing. Where did you, I don't even have a Twitter account. So like, what image did you see? And they described that one painting perfectly. So it had hit Twitter. So at this point, I'm thinking, countless people have seen this image, and it spun off into the image we were just talking about, the Tristan Strong book series. So then Disney saw my work, and then Scholastic saw it. It's like, it's a snowball effect from having consistent work online. And I've also, I tell my students that it's not enough just to have your portfolio website, because a portfolio website is like your house. It's got all your contact information. It's got a little blurb telling everybody how great you are or whatever. And it's got all your links to your social media presence, or it might not. But if you don't have a social media presence, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you don't have to have all three or more. You don't have to be on TikTok making a fool of yourself. But if you have a social media account, that is a road to your website. If you don't have a road to your website, nobody's going to know you exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can be screaming to the top of your lungs, hey, go check out my website, or going to conventions and passing people business cards that are ultimately going to end up in the trash. But if you have an account on social media, it's nothing for somebody to just say follow, right? And next time they go to their phone or their computer screen or their tablet or whatever, and they scroll through and they see your work on there consistently at a certain time every single week or every other week or monthly, and you're producing quality content, then that's going to make somebody say, hey, a friend of mine is looking for somebody that does something like this. Let me forward them this link. And then they check out your website, and then they find out, oh my goodness, this person is in Burbank. This person is in our country or wherever. It doesn't really matter, but let's find out if they're available. And that's just that's the world we live in now. Like, I could tell you how to find clients that is, based on what I was told when I got out of school, which was go to conventions, meet people, network, pass out your business cards, don't be a jerk. Well, that last part stands the test of time, right? But
Yeah.
it's so much of it now is based on your online presence or lack thereof. And people say, oh, I hate social media. I don't like that. I'm not going to do that. Okay, then don't do it. But you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, like how
It's
else are you
free,
going to get
too.
yourself out? Yeah, and it's free. I think like we all, like the three of us, like we started, like you joked about having your stuff on a CD. I've heard of Eric also having like a physical portfolio. I remember in my class having to, it was like one of my final assignments is to like print out a portfolio book and have like a book made. So we've all been on that side of the creative industry where it was all about meeting people in person. But now that the world has changed a little bit, you know, you don't have to maybe post selfies on your social media, but keep it professional. So you have the option of giving a little bit of insight into you as an artist and who you are and in your personal life, or you don't have to. You can keep it strictly just images of your work. It's up to you. Some people like to give a little bit more of their personal life. Some people don't. That's okay. But it's smart to, like we've said, I think it's a common theme here today, is use the resources that you have, whatever resources that you can find, whether it's from the school and CG Spectrum, or if it's online, social media, get yourself out there a little bit. It's part of the networking experience now, whether you like it or not. It used to be all about in person and business cards and meeting people, and now it's a little bit of both. You have places like LinkedIn where you can find any artist, but use it to your advantage. Like I said before, if you really like a movie and you want to work for a certain studio, look up the credits of that movie. Figure out all of the artists who worked on that movie, do a little bit of work.
Be a little bit of a creep,
easy.
right?
Yeah, be a creep. Find them on LinkedIn, find them on IMDb, find their ArtStation page, Google their name, see what you can find, and then reach out to them once you've done a little bit of research on them. So you could actually say, Eric, I love that book cover that you did. Tell me more about that, you know? So you don't just reach out to people and say, hey, look at my portfolio. You got to like give them something, right? So some challenges and obstacles. I mean, we've talked about this quite a bit already today. We're talking a lot today. We're going way over time. I'm going to try to breeze through some of these next few slides here. We have talked about being in a competitive industry and how you're working up against all of your other peers. You know, like Eric said, you know, there might be 2% of the people in your class that end up being rock stars, and you're going up against the rest. Like anyone that doesn't give up, you're going up against maybe 50% of those people. And that's every year. People are graduating in your field every year. New artists are being born. It's crazy. So it's very competitive. You have to keep trying to evolve yourself, putting in the time, networking, and updating and maintaining your portfolio. Every time I see something that says the most recent piece of work was 6 or 8 months old, what have you been doing lately? Like, unless you're working, unless you're in a studio.
Well, then that's the other thing.
Unless you're working in a studio, right? Like if you have a full-time job, then that's your excuse. Because sometimes you work on stuff like the Marvel movie where you can't post it to your portfolio until it comes out. So that's right. That's it. But if I see a student, someone who's recently graduated, someone who hasn't worked in the industry yet, and the last thing you've done is 6 months old, we have a problem, right?
Keep those personal things going, because those you can post, right? Those don't have that NDA issue. Because sometimes things get locked up for years, and that's kind of a bummer, right? So
or update old pieces. You know what I mean? If you look at something and you're like, you know what, I think I should remove this from my portfolio because it's not at that level anymore. You know, I've surpassed this level and I want that consistency, like we've been talking about. Then either delete it or update an old piece. There's nothing stopping you from revisiting old work. Like nobody's going to say, hey, actually you did this back in 2018. Like, no, well, I've redone it or I've made some changes. Like find a way to maintain and update yourself. And you will start to get those opportunities. But if you stay at the same level forever, if you're not getting callbacks today, what's going to change in a year? Like when everyone else around you is getting better and better and you haven't done anything recently. So I think being active, whether it's with networking, putting in the time or updating your portfolio, I wanted
to jump in at the tail end of that and say that to stress again the part about passion, because for example, Wizards of the Coast, they produce a very popular card game called Magic the Gathering. It's been going on for 25 plus years. It's got fans from all over the world, and they commission illustrations for that. I was told when I initially wanted to work with them years ago, their art directors are looking not just at your technical skill level, but what you enjoy painting. And if you are putting out work that you think is going to get you a job, but you don't really care about it, it's going to show in your level of finish and the level of effort that you put into the piece. But if it's something you're passionate about, then you're going to put in, an excessive amount of time, every little detail, the highlights in the eyeballs or the gooey bits on all the little monsters, everything. It's going to show that you loved it. And going back to the story I was telling about the piece that went viral, a little mini viral image that I had painted, that was a personal piece. That was something I did for myself. And part of my whole philosophy comes from a speech I heard from a Taoist philosopher named Alan Watts. And the opening line of that speech is, what would you do if money were no object? What would you create? What would you do with your time? And I had to answer that for myself. Well, I would do this. And I wrote it down and I did it. And because I did it, I put it out in the world, and my passion for that showed. And somebody else said, my God, we want him to do that for us. And then somebody else saw, the end result of my work that I did for Disney or somebody else and said, my God, we need him to do that for us multiple times. And then without me having to submit my portfolio to Wizards of the Coast, after years of me thinking about submitting or trying, they contacted me and said, hey, are you available? That comes from you doing something you care about. And I tell all of my students, I'm not trying to make clones of myself, because you see that in a lot of schools, not just online, just everywhere. The mentors, the instructors are making little carbon copies of themselves, from their palette to their compositions to everything. And then you can look at the student work and go, oh, you were taught by so-and-so. And that was what my portfolio looked like. And no lie, my portfolio looked exactly like my instructors, or like a bad copy of it when I got out of school. And I had people on the different art forums of the time telling me, oh, so this looks like so-and-so's work. And I'm like, oh God, man, I had trying to figure out what it is about me that sets me apart from everybody else, so that I can jump on that and make it work for myself. And that's the frustrating part of trying to figure out a style so that you can become who you want to become, right? You look on ArtStation, and I tell some students, stay off of ArtStation for now, because you don't know what you're looking at. And that can really mess with your mental health. You don't know if you're looking at professional work or something that some hobbyist spent 3 to 6 months working on. And you're now all up in your head about, oh my God, I'll never be that good. Not as good as something that took somebody 6 months to do. Like, don't freak yourself out, But like, you'll never know unless you ask.
spend 1 week on the assignment. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then with the concept art program, you might get 2 weeks max to work on something. In my class, you get, 4 to 6 weeks to work on something, which is more industry standard for the amount of time that you would have to put in. And I tell students from day one, if you listen to what I'm saying and apply the instruction of the course, you are going to see a huge artistic jump in your abilities. And that's just about putting in the time. And we've all said it, it's a slow build, but if you put in that time and that effort, you're going to see artistic growth. And then once you've built up that confidence, then I ask you, okay, what do you want to do? some people don't have an answer for that. And then I have other students that are more like excelling that say, well, here is a checklist of all the things that I want to accomplish before I leave this course. And we do it. We hit bullet points. Okay. You want to work for Hearthstone? Done. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's put that portfolio together and hopefully get you some work.
Yeah, and to speak to the passion aspect real quickly there, it's not enough to just say, I want to be a painter, right? You have to know what kind of painter, what subject matter. Are you going to be a realist? Are you going to be an impressionist, right? Those are the specifics you need to know about. Are you going to work for Hearthstone? What are the things that are hallmarks of their style? Really analyze it. If you don't know what you're shooting for, how can you work toward it, right? So be as specific as you can be.
Yeah. And you know, I see that with some of our students as well, talking about students who or you know, amateurs that start looking like other artists. And I think it's natural because when you're starting out, you know, you have, whether you're at CG Spectrum, you have these mentors, or any kind of school setting, you have this assignment, or maybe you're following a tutorial online. You know, a lot of people watching today might not be our students, and maybe you've checked out some YouTube tutorials, right? And so you're copying someone stroke by stroke, like, you know, task by task, one thing at a time. And yes, by the time you finish, you look and you're like, yeah, that looks like the tutorial, you know, it looks really good. But have you created something for yourself? It's one thing to make something from a tutorial to learn a technique, but you don't want to be creating all of your portfolio pieces from tutorials or school assignments, because you're just going to look like everyone else, whether it's other students, you know, other people on YouTube, or your mentor or other artists that you look up to, or the people that you're trying to emulate when you're copying this assignment, you know? So I think it's normal for that to happen at the beginning, but you have to recognize that and then start to transition from a portfolio of assignments and tutorials and start to replace that with your own stuff. Start figuring out that style. It's not easy. It's not something that you're going to just figure out in a day. But
you usually have to try it. You have to actually do it, because there's plenty of art you're going to like looking at, you're going to appreciate, that you wouldn't actually want to do, right? Yep. Like Eric had mentioned about the racing games, right? There's you know, doing very complicated mechanical drawings are things that I love looking at. They just are so cool. And I would just melt if I was trying to do that stuff. I just don't have the patience to do that super technical level of drawing. So this is, again, you've got to try your hand at it so you can see what is the process like. Am I withering away? Is my soul evaporating trying to do this kind of work, right? Or am I loving this? And that passion will come through, right? That the stuff that you love, people will see that.
Yeah. And in research, I talk about research all the time, finding your niche. You know, a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, I just don't know what my passion is yet. You know, find it through research. Think about your favorite movies. Think about your favorite games. Research companies that exist locally, you know, even if they're not game studios or film studios. You know, don't skip the commercials one day on YouTube, you know, or actually don't change the channel if you're watching TV. Watch the commercials, do a bit of research, figure out who made that funny chewing gum commercial or that funny beer commercial. There's a studio out there that's making cool work, even though it's not for movies or TV shows or games. There are really cool artists working on advertisements and things like that that might even fit your style. So I think we've talked about this a little bit already too, finding your niche and different career options. So a lot of it does come down to research and, you know, making your portfolio stand out. You know, do you guys each give me one tip that you would, you know, suggest to make your portfolio stand out? Tyler, go.
Stand out, boy. One tip. This is a tough one.
I'm giving you one. Because we're running out of time here.
Consistent color palette. There you go.
Consistent color palette. I like that. Eric, one tip. If you could give someone one tip to make their portfolio stand out.
That's such a tight question.
I put you guys
all
on
right,
the spot. I'm
so
sorry.
here's the thing. My I like painting the figure. I like painting the human figure, and I like playing with multiple light sources. So the thing that I use to help attract somebody to my art from across the room or at a thumbnail image on Amazon when they're looking at book covers is the colors. Right? I'm not that guy that does the muted palette with some color accents. I do these bold kind of saturated things or playing with multiple light sources to like, that's my hook.
Mhm.
There are other people out there that focus on creature design or creature illustration. I think of Todd Lockwood. He's a sci-fi fantasy illustrator. He's like the master of illustrating dragons. Like I wouldn't even mess with trying to compete with that. There's other people out there that say they're the master of this, they're the master of that. Then they have to step up. They have to show that they are. Because if you're trying to get work doing a certain thing, you're up against that. You're up against the best of the best that absolutely love painting dragons or creatures or, mech designs or something like that. And you have to figure out, A, if that's something you want to do, and B, how to do it better than them, better than the competition. But yeah, if that's one tip, figure out what it is you love to do and do it really amazingly well.
I think like both of your answers kind of point towards consistency, whether it's consistency in a color palette or consistency in the style. I think most, if not all, successful artists that I follow online or every time I check out a portfolio, when you go to someone's portfolio, at least a strong artist, in my opinion, you can tell who they are no matter what piece you look at. Like they all look like this is Eric Wilkerson, or all of the pieces, and we'll look at your portfolios in a second, but all of Tyler's, his whole portfolio screams Tyler James. You don't have like something steampunk and then something bright and cutesy and then a demon and it's like, I'm sure both of you could draw any one of those things, but you found your niche, you found something that speaks to you. Because if you don't have that consistency, if you're all over the place, you won't be as memorable, because people won't know if they should remember the cute thing you drew or the demon that you drew. And they're like, we'll just find someone who draws just cute, So I think consistency, that's my answer. That's what I got from both of you. And so that's what we do see here with both of your portfolios and your body of work. I think it's amazing that we have so many mentors here that each have their own style. Eric's style, I mean, these are three from the same series, obviously, so obviously they're going to look similar, but there is a consistent style with a lot of the work that you do.
Eric, I get a little bit of a Donato Giancola vibe from your work sometimes.
Oh, it's still happening. 20
compliment.
years later, people are still,
Was that your teacher?
Yeah, I studied with Donato back in college.
I know. I'm poking a little fun at Eric.
Yeah. See, it still happens. Yeah, and you know what? I do have your portfolio here. So this can kind of maybe speak to what I was talking about. Even if we didn't know that this was Eric's work, when you scroll through the portfolio, even some of the stuff that isn't maybe meant for children or something like that is more, action heavy or more mature, it still has the same feeling to it. Even the sci-fi stuff, or the more futuristic kind of stuff.
I like that
Here
Mars
there's
Attacks
a
picture.
bikini, yeah, the Mars Attacks one, but even that's very different from the children's book cover.
Yeah,
it still feels like Eric drew it. There's a consistent level of color and quality here that you can see in this portfolio that makes it so strong. Like it's memorable, where like you click away from the page and what Eric is capable of. There's a nice variety, of different pieces of work and different types of illustrations. And so they vary. There's, this, type of like protest thing happening here, like, and that is very different from children's novels, but you can still tell that Eric drew it, which I think is really special. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. And, when it comes to our tips and how to find that consistent work. And, same thing here with Tyler. Hold on, let me pull up his portfolio, and same thing here. It's like very different characters and creatures and different styles of work and different types of concept art. So whether it's, some sort of weapon, or when it's, more of an illustration, there's still that same feeling. And, Tyler was talking about how he has a consistent color palette. Like, I see that here. It's very different from Eric's. I'm sure they could both still draw a demon if they wanted to, but they have their consistent style. And when someone is looking for something that fits this style, maybe it's Blizzard or something like that, they come to this and they're like, yes, this person, this artist understands our vision. They match the style of work that we're trying to create here. I trust the level of consistency that I see on this page. And then that's how you get hired, right? Obviously in a simplified sort of way. But yeah, I think it's so cool to see.
I'm heavily influenced by some of the darker fantasy artists like Frazetta or Brahm, for example. So hopefully that probably shows a bit in the work there. But this is why I say just students need to find who those people are that they look up to and really analyze what makes that art look the way that it does. And your own flavor will come in, whether you're trying to or not. It's just going to be, you're never going to be them, right? Like I said to Eric, like, hey, there's a little bit of a Donato in there, but it's not Donato's work, right? Like Eric's work is its own work, right? It's special because it's his work, and it might feel a little similar, like my work feels similar to some of my favorite artists, right? But you don't really have to try to be yourself. That just happens, right? So don't be too concerned about that. The key is to just figure out what you love. If you know what you love and you do that kind of work, then that consistency, it'll just happen.
Yeah, and
that's the piece. By
is this the one?
That's the one.
Okay, someone was asking this. What piece is Eric referring to? Katie, one of our viewers, was asking. Yeah, this is the piece, Katie. It's right here. Yep. You can find it on Eric's website, ericwilkersonart.com.
If you go to my YouTube page, you can actually see me painting it.
Whoa.
So that's an oil painting. It's 13 by 17 inches. So it's small. But yeah, it's, that one painting is partially the reason why I live in this house.
It's so inspiring.
It's a steamroll effect.
Yeah.
I bet that makes that character feel like a real person to you, right, Eric?
It does, yeah.
It's weird like that, but you feel like you're kind of creating
not
things.
Not to throw off on a tangent, but I sold that painting at a convention in 2018 because I needed the money for daycare. And
what a story behind it.
The illustration work that I was doing, I wasn't really happy with. So things were a little slow. So I needed the money, and I wasn't really all that keen on letting this one go. But I'm like, you know what? That's 2 months of daycare and some bills. So I'll sell it. And I instantly regretted it. Last Christmas, my wife tracked down the person that bought that painting, and she bought it back. And she came down the stairs with this box, and I opened it up. I'm like, what is this? Like, I don't know what it is, but I opened it up and I instantly burst into tears.
Oh my God. I'm like tearing up now. Why am I on a webinar right now?
Really cool story.
And
that's so cool.
And now it sits at a place of honor, like right in the foyer of our house. Like when you walk in the door, that's the first thing you see.
Everybody's going to have pieces like that where there's a story behind it, right? I've got some too where you just remember where you were when you painted it. You remember, when you first displayed it at a gallery, reactions and things, right? it's just a cool thing that maybe people don't talk about as much, but it's part of your personal story.
Yeah, like and that's such an important thing, and that's why like I don't think this was a tangent at all, um because it's so much about your personal situation, you know what I mean? Like the choices you make as a professional are based on your life. Like we can give you so many tips, and you Google stuff and it's like top 5 tips to be an illustrator, and that's helpful, it's good, but you still have to take into account your life. I was about to say your wife. You have to take into account Eric's wife. No, but you have to take into account your life, because yeah, sometimes you do need to make the choice of, okay, am I gonna spend a bunch of time working on personal projects that don't pay the bills, or do I need to pay for childcare right now? That's an important thing that a lot of people here watching, those are decisions that people have to make, and those are real life decisions. Do I have to pay rent today? I need to eat. I've had struggles in my life too, where I've been job hunting to just work anywhere because I knew that I had rent to pay. you know that stuff will dictate your life. And it's important to keep those goals in mind. Like there's personal goals that are intertwined with all of those creative goals and career goals that you want to have. Those stepping stones, it's the same staircase. The buying your first car, buying your first house is on the same staircase as like getting your first internship and getting your first freelance gig. It's all part of the same, staircase, if you will. And you're taking those steps one step at a time, but they're all related. To act like there's this big separation between life and work. You can try to separate as much as you can, but it'll all come back together one day.
I want to just mention one thing on the last slide briefly.
Yeah.
First of all, that's not hex. That's just a quick mislabel.
Oh,
that was
sorry.
some personal stuff. No, it's all good. Some personal stuff I did, but I wanted to mention something about motivating yourself, which can be tricky at times, right? One little thing I do to motivate myself is on personal work I'm doing, I try to make it part of something bigger, even if it might not be a real professional project. Think about, is it part of some kind of universe you're crafting? And we're all artists here, right? So we all know this feeling when we're a kid of imagining that alternate universe. Don't lose that. It's something that can help motivate you. Like these series of nights that I did a night of every color. And so I did the first one. I thought that's kind of neat. Why don't I just do more of them, right? And each one that I did motivated me to do the next one. So you can create these little universes, these little series of images for yourself, and that can be a way to motivate you. It doesn't have to go anywhere, right? It doesn't have to be part of something huge. As long as it's providing fuel for you to keep producing art, that's what's important.
Mm-hmm. And this goes beyond motivation as well. Creating a universe within your portfolio, and this isn't just illustration. I talk about the same thing with other students in different fields here. Is with our school assignments, we're giving you a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And you put them all together in a portfolio, and it looks like a mix matched of like all these different styles and all these different things, and nothing really fits together. And so one of the first things I suggest for people who just graduated and they're like, well, what do I do next? Like, what should I put in my portfolio? A lot of the times it's about building on existing pieces, like create a universe around one item. Most people who work professionally in the industry, they don't just make one prop for a game and then move on to some other game. You're going to make 5 props for this game, 10 props, not just one character for this movie or creature. You might make a couple of different characters or creatures or environments. And so you're going to be building on one universe. And so showing a client or a potential studio that you're applying to, that you understand how to find consistency, not just in a whole portfolio, but within certain projects where you can build on that and say, here's not just one car I drew, here's a selection of 10 cars, all these different styles of cars, old ones, new ones. And this is my whole car collection that I've created online. Whatever it is, whatever your theme needs to be, whether it's cards like this or something else. If you create a character, what does that character's bedroom look like? challenge yourself to think about like, well, what other outfits would that character wear if they're going to school tomorrow? What would this character wear to school, or what would they wear to battle, or what would they wear on their day off, and really challenge yourself to create a universe around one object or one character or one place. I love that you said that, because I've been saying it's like validation that
Yeah,
what I'm telling
absolutely.
students is right. Thank God.
I think it's sometimes conveyed as, or people perceive it as being cheesy when you have stories alongside your images. And I say, to hell with that.
Oh, well, especially as an
Make the story
illustrator or a
right.
concept artist.
Absolutely.
Like, it's all about the
you don't have
story.
to share the story, but if the story is in your mind, that's what matters.
Well, because
Yeah.
it's not, because when you're working on an illustration, you're working on something that could take you potentially days or weeks, sometimes months to create. And life happens around that image. And the day-to-day rendering process of creating an illustration might be something you forget. But when you're just left with the end result, but you will remember what happened around, whatever drama, whatever things happened to you while you were painting that.
You
And
absolutely
then
do. Yeah.
if it means something to you, then like for example, like this Hearthstone sample is something that one of my students is doing in my class for her third term. Like, if this leads to work, she will remember this piece for the rest of her life.
I know Jessica's here too. I saw her chatting earlier. Hi, Jessica.
For the
Good job,
rest of her
Jessica.
life.
Keep it up.
Yeah. And just for people who are watching who don't realize, like, this is one of our students work that we're looking at here. Just to show you. And I think this is also a great example. And this is someone I've talked to. It's so exciting to see how much more work is in here now, Jessica. I'm so happy.
She's been busy.
Yeah, totally busy. But now I'm starting to see that consistency in the style,
Yes.
And that's something we talked about at the beginning. Her work has always been good. Even before she joined CG Spectrum, she obviously had a talent for drawing. And then here you see some of the school assignments. And so this is what I was talking about. And again, these are really well done, but it's like there's this, and then there's this kind of more futuristic thing. Like, this doesn't really fit with this environment. And then we have this, which is like a different type of prop. And these are all well done. But before, Jessica had some more work, it was a little bit of like, okay, you see a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I see the level of quality is there.
But like,
now
if you look at that top
all of this
row,
consistency. Yeah,
right,
this top row looks so solid now.
Exactly. And that's what we're talking about. That's why
Yeah.
when I've been working with her, like, you want to have something in your portfolio when you come out that shows what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Right. You don't just want to have a sporadic group of, okay, this is my Viking piece, this is my whatever, to show that I can do it. But to do some world building exercise, to have a consistent body of work where you can say, yeah, I love every second of this. Now let me go find a studio that will allow me to do this every day.
Yeah.
She hates this piece, so like, take it off as fast as
I'll quick, I'll move it. But yeah, and so we see that, and it's something that takes time. Like, I remember talking to Jessica, and I swear, Jessica, I'll stop talking about you in a second. She's probably so embarrassed, but and it's something that takes time. Months ago, I talked to her for the first time. She's like, what should I do? What direction should I go in? This and that. It's something that takes time. It takes a lot of effort. This is not easy. We're not sugarcoating this stuff. I know we're laughing, we're smiling, we're all having a good time, but this is not easy. And seeing the progression with our students is, so amazing. So these are examples of two different
this is
work from the same assignment, right?
Yeah. So with the illustration program, again, like I said, I'm not trying to make clones of myself. And this particular project is a very vague brief. You're given a very vague brief, just basically saying confessions of a blank, you fill in the blank, war veteran. And so you can go steampunk with it. You can go sci-fi, fantasy. You tell me what you're passionate about, and it comes through automatically without me having to force your hand. When I see your sketches, I know where you're going. And so nobody gives me the same image twice.
Mm.
I love that because it keeps
So
it fresh. It keeps every assignment fresh. And so Jessica went sci-fi with it, and my student Oliver, who had a passion for putting together a portfolio specifically geared toward Magic the Gathering, he let me know that from day one, and I said, all right, well, that's what we're going to do. And so he knocked out not just this character, but he did the whole concept design, worked out what this character looks like, weapons, all that, and then did multiple illustrations around this character. And we had settled on this one, like finalizing this as the woman that is, or this character that is writing out her confession, and as she is writing it, it's a little bit of that symbolism happens in the moment where she's getting the lashes from all the things that she did bad. It's like that. It's a physical embodiment of whatever she's writing is coming off of the page and scarring her. So
wow, that's a cool story.
That's a really cool story.
I wanted to mention something that you had touched on there, Eric, was this idea that Oliver spent time conceptualizing the character and then illustrating the character. And something that's important for people to understand too is that an illustration that you need to make that has no conceptual art created prior is going to take longer than an illustration that you're getting handed the existing designs for. So when you're working with a client or something and they are very open book and they're like, we don't know anything of what we want, we just want it to be some dark fantasy warrior. It's like, okay, well, are they in armor? What kind of armor is it? If they don't have any of that stuff figured out, it's okay that your image will take longer than if you'd been handed those things. So this is stuff that takes time for you to realize, for you to have that context for how long should things be taking, right? But I just wanted to kind of mention that because those are two pretty common scenarios you'll face, right? You'll face an illustration where here is the existing design, and then on the other side of that, here's an illustration where you have freedom to do your own concept, and one will take longer. That's just how it goes.
And this is a perfect example of taking a school assignment and then pushing it to the next level. So we do have a school assignment in the program where one of the first assignments, right, is to create a demon book. And so Oliver has taken that and he's built upon that and now created a whole scene. Now it's an illustration. It's not just a concept anymore of a book. Now it tells a story. And I remember seeing this in the early stages, like post it to Slack and stuff like that. It's so cool to see how he's developed it into something else. You continue working on it. You get the
funny thing
feedback
about
from
this
people.
was Oliver started in the concept program at the school, and then I saw him doing the book, and we had talked a bit about what his goals were, and I immediately messaged with the school's admin, and I said, I think Oliver actually probably should be in our illustration program. So we did a shift, we did a handoff to Eric, and so that's something that I think is really cool about the school as well, is that we're trying to make sure that the students are in the right place.
Yeah. When I saw this piece, it was just the book. And I said, well, what if you do some stuff to it to make it more of a scene? Like, what if that demon character in the center is pulling or unlocking, or like what happens around the book? You can start playing with the scale of it and play with the environment. Where does this exist in space? And typically when I question students like that and ask them, well, what else can you do with this? That's when they give me gold, because it's almost like they're just waiting for somebody to just let them run loose. And I've experienced that with some of my students in the intro course, where I say, okay, like this concept looks really cool, but now what if you put this in an environment? What's that going to look like? Have fun.
Yeah.
So that's how I'll end it. And I'll move on to another student. We just say, have fun.
Mic drop.
Go for it.
Reminds me of one of my first art directors. He said, just make it bitchin'. That was his phrase. Like, all right, I'll do my best. Aye, Captain.
Before we go forward, I'm going to talk a little bit about our courses, but some of you are watching because we have this contest, right? This contest. So I'm going to say the secret word. If you would like to enter to win a free portfolio review from one of our mentors, the secret word is painting. Remember that? I'm going to say it one more time. The secret word is painting. If you want to enter to win a free portfolio review from CG Spectrum and one of our mentors, the secret word is painting. It's the last time I'm going to say it. And so next, I'm going to talk a little bit about CG Spectrum. So if this webinar was interesting to you, and you want to learn more, you want to work on these cool projects like you saw from some of our student examples, and you want to learn advanced digital illustration at CG Spectrum, you can start your journey with expert career training and mentorship from people like Tyler, Eric, and myself. You'll discover how to create polished art for films, video games, and publishing, like some of the artwork you've seen today. You'll also get mentorship from award-winning established artists like Tyler and Eric, and many other mentors that we have on staff. We have over 100 mentors now at CG Spectrum. It's crazy. We have so many people working with us, and they work at studios all over the world on the biggest projects. It's pretty cool to be working alongside them. And we have a curriculum that we constantly update every year that is focused on job outcomes. So we get feedback from not only our mentors and our students, but also from the industry. I talk to studios, I ask them what they're looking for if they're hiring junior artists. And so I'm also part of a committee that reviews our curriculum every year. And so we go through every single course that we have that we're offering, and we talk about what needs to be changed, what could be upgraded, and what we can do better. And so we're updating our courses all of the time to make sure that we're still consistently industry standard. And we have a specialized focus on art for film, games, and publishing. But as we talk today, you can take those skills and those fundamentals and work in a number of different industries with all the skills that you're going to learn with us here at CG Spectrum. You can also master complex illustration techniques, like some of the ones you've seen from Jessica Geis and Oliver Harbour. You can also learn to communicate effectively through your art, like what Eric was talking about, and telling a story through your illustration. And you'll also get personalized video critiques of your work. So we talked a little bit about the relationships that Tyler and Eric have had with our students, Jessica and Oliver, and all of our other students here at the school. They're getting personalized video critiques. They're trying to help you push yourself, and you'll graduate with a portfolio of original creations. Is it going to be easy? No, but we're giving you the resources to get yourself to that level. And eventually you will get a job as long as you're working hard at it. And we'll help you along the way.
Just think about how much of the world around you is something that has been designed by an artist, right? There will never be a lack of need for people to do visual designing. It's, just look around wherever you are right now. Look around, right? How much of that has been designed?
Yeah,
most of it, right?
But that's true, and I say it to a lot of students here. You came to this school because you had a passion for games, or you came to the school because you had a passion for film, but that's not the only thing that you can do with this. And like we said, we're talking about stepping stones at the beginning of this webinar. Sometimes a stepping stone in advertising or for small businesses is still a step in the right direction. There are so many different paths you can take to get to that common goal, to get to that dream job eventually, as long as you continue working. And so if you are interested in entering to win a free portfolio feedback session, 5 people are going to win 5-minute portfolio feedback sessions with one of our mentors. So as I said the secret word already. I'm not going to say it again. Look out for the entry form in the webinar replay email. We'll send it out in the next 48 hours. Once we're done, there'll be a form that you complete, and you have to complete it by September the 19th. And keep an eye on your inbox. Check your emails. You should be doing that anyway, but check your emails. And some of the benefits of studying at CG Spectrum, I love talking about this. We offer job-focused training. So you're learning from industry mentors who work in the industry now. Tyler and Eric are both busy people that I'm sure they have personal projects and paid projects to get to after this. on top of all of their students. We also have a flexible scheduling and payment plan. So for all of you people who are parents and you're trying to get your career going, or maybe you do have a full-time job because you need to eat, you need to pay your bills, we have flexible scheduling options for you to learn on your time, and we have payment plans available as well. You'll have a live weekly call with your mentor every week and opportunities to get additional feedback via Slack. That's where our online community exists. You'll also get industry insights and networking opportunities from over 100 mentors that are in our community and over 2,000 students and alumni that are currently in our community. So you'll get to talk to them as well as people like me who can help you with your career. It is 100% online. We have been online since before the pandemic and will continue to do it in the future. And so it really helps people from all over the world to access this content and have a good chance at becoming, an illustration professional. This is also hands-on education. You're learning as you go every week. It's not just reading a textbook or reading a bunch of theory. You're learning as you go and getting feedback on your assignments as you go. And I'll say it once, I'll say it again. We have an amazing community. I mean, we've seen some people from our community here in the chat. It's so nice to see everyone. Everyone is so friendly. We have such an inspiring community of peers, of other students, current students, past students. All of our alumni, like so many of them, are still active in the community, which is amazing. They're sharing their work. We have a little bit of time for a Q&A. We've spent so much time talking. I've had such a good time that I've forgotten about Q&A. So we do have a couple of pre-submitted questions here. Let's try to keep it quick. We've talked about the niche already, so I'm gonna cancel that one because we've answered it. But I'm gonna go to you first, Tyler. Do you have any tips for using image references?
Yeah, I mean, I would say you want to make sure that you have access to reference material. And it shouldn't just be one source, right? So there are lots of sources online. You can find these really high quality image packs online. This is the joy of the digital age now, right? Is that we have so much content we have access to. But books as well. And I'm a fan of, they have these little posable little anatomy dolls that you can pose and take pictures of and try different angles and things. So I would say, don't just rely on one source for that. And I think that it's important to be using that material, right? Because if you're trying to do it without reference, then you're working in a vacuum and you're not improving.
Yeah. I agree.
Or as my painting teacher in college once told me, imagine how much better that image would look if you knew what you were painting, if you knew what you were, you know what I mean? So if you're somebody that's talking about, I want to paint robots and dragons and monsters and doing all kinds of cool stuff, and I say, okay, well, where's your reference? Oh, I'm just making it up as I go. Versus, well, let's look at what dragon scales look like. Let's look at alligators. Let's look at pistons and metal and reflective light and all of that stuff, chrome, and have an understanding of how light hits a form and turns into the shadow and how that applies to different textures, and then apply that knowledge to your imaginary thing and how much better that might look.
And we get pretty nerdy about that stuff in the classes, right? Where we're talking about materials and the quality of the shadows, the reflections, breaking down things like what's a diffuse reflection versus a specular reflection. And it sounds crazy, but that's the stuff you have to start to think about if you want to try and take something that is completely fantastical and make people believe that it's real.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, I think we're always talking about digital stuff. We have Google Images, we have this, someone said Pinterest. Also, like, go outside. Like, you have a digital camera in your phone, take photos of things outside. Not everything has to be super high fantasy. All of the fantasy you see and all of the work that we see here is still based on some form of reality, right? And so go outside, take pictures of plants, take pictures of cars, take pictures of buildings at different times of the day to see how the light affects that building, different weather, different light, go outside is my takeaway here. So quickly, I'm going to try to answer a couple of questions. We have 20 questions here. Real quick, Tyler, you mentioned that you're an art director, or you have been in the past. What are some social or logistical skills apart from art skills that you need as an art director? So like soft skills, what would you recommend?
Well, as an art director, you're juggling a lot of things and you're giving a lot of feedback to many different people. You're also a liaison between your department and other departments on the team. So, you're talking to the technical team, you're talking to the producers, right? So you're sort of representing the art department in that way as well. So you want to have an understanding of how art fits into the total pipeline of a production, not just your avenue alone. So that's definitely something good to be getting a little bit better handle on if you want to go into art direction. Being clear about feedback as well, and knowing how to work with people of different personalities, right? Some people are more receptive to certain kinds of critiques, right? And it's not that we want to sugarcoat things necessarily, but you want to have some interpersonal skills, right? In this age of everything being online, right? Talk to people, right? Figure out how to converse and have a conversation, and work creatively with somebody. That's really, really important. If you're in an art director situation and you can't have those conversations with people on the team, that's a deal breaker, right? That's going to make things really difficult.
Absolutely. Okay, I have another question here. This is going to be for you, Eric. How heavy is the workload on average? I have a chronic arm injury and I still can't make 9 to 5 physically. Are there jobs out there with more flexible work hours as long as you get the job done on time, so it allows you to take long breaks in between?
Well, if you've got some kind of repetitive motion injury that prevents you from drawing or being creative for extensive amounts of time, this probably is not the career for you. That's just real. I would, whether you're doing that work digitally or whether you're doing that work traditionally in some kind of paint, it requires a lot of hours of rendering. You could definitely come up with a simpler style, something more graphic and aimed at like children's books or editorial or something like that, where a piece might only take you a day or so to create. But if you're talking about doing anything anywhere near the level of finish that you see for like Riot splash art or anything that you've seen what Tyler and I do, that's several hours of work, sometimes over a week or two or a month of effort put in. And but here's the thing. It really depends on the deadline and your physical ability to do the work. So if you know that the deadline is a month and a half out and you put in 4 hours a day on it, then you're going to get, you can get the job done, if you're fast. For my freelance work, I put in 4 or 5 hours in the evening after my kids go to bed. That's where I do my book cover work. But I'm also really fast. But I'm also coming from having experience with repetitive motion injuries, and I know when my body just says, go stop before you hurt yourself. And that's not just with my arm, that's with my lower back. As you get older, you realize you can't pull all-nighters anymore because your body will shut down on you. So
sleep deprivation
is no joke.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, just pushing through it is not the answer. Like there's times where you have to be motivated. That's very different.
Yeah.
But just forcing yourself to do stuff when you're not in the right headspace or physical space can be really dangerous. So we'll say, listen, this is possible. I think it's possible to still have a career, but it's all about your time management.
Time management and knowing what your physical limits are.
Yeah.
And doing what you can to your environment currently to make it as ergonomic as possible to limit more damage, right? Because that's something that maybe when you're younger, you don't notice it, as Eric said, but that adds up over time, right? Like I had a hand injury not too long ago, and it was just from using a mouse on the computer too much. So now I have a vertical mouse that I use, and it's fixed the problem, right? But wouldn't it have been nice to have known that from the beginning and just thought more about ergonomics? So definitely think about that. Think about, how are you sitting? What is the desk you're sitting at? Your eyes, right?
My
The
reminder to
lighting
sit
in
up
your
straight.
room, eye strain, and here I am, like, I'm all hunched over while we're
I
doing the
know.
webinar, right? But, like, just think about this stuff, right? Like, think about the fact that you are a person that gets damaged if you're not careful. So
Mhm.
ergonomics are important.
That's
Yeah.
like week 1 of the advanced courses, talking about the ergonomics of painting, how you should be sitting, how you should be standing, or working in front of your Cintiq or on your laptop or whatever, so that you don't hurt yourself during the course.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
get up from your seat every so often, right? Get the blood flowing. If you're sitting
Yeah.
there for 4 hours and you're just like becoming a zombie staring at the screen or staring at your easel, right? Then you're not making those choices as clearly as you could be, as if you had, all your blood flowing, right? It could be just taking a walk. It could be, maybe lifting some weights, whatever it is, right? Get the blood pumping, and your brain will thank you for it.
Yeah.
And I think communication. So, we're talking mostly about people working from home and as freelancers or contract workers. But my experience working at a big studio is I have worked with some artists and people in my studio who did need some accommodations, physical accommodations because of injury. So it is possible to still have a career, but the important thing is to speak up about it. You have to talk to your manager and tell them, maybe they can offer you a stand-up desk. Maybe, if you have a chronic issue, at least if we are, as management, if we are aware of it, then we can protect you. We can make sure that the supervisors never come to us and say, how come Tyler is like, he's late all the time? It's like, well, no, he has a chronic issue. We are aware of it. As long as he's still able to finish his tasks, he's staying here. You know what I mean? So people like me, management, we can protect you, but we don't know what's wrong with you, especially with a lot of invisible chronic issues that are, you can't see in person, so it's important to talk to people that you can trust about it so that we can help you, so that your team can help you out. So it's totally common. You don't have to be like, tip top shape. It helps
Sure,
for maintenance, but I've worked with so many people who have
I get chronic migraines, for
physical
example.
problems. Yeah.
Well, because there's I mean, if you have a Cintiq, you're literally staring into a light box, so that's the eye strain issue. And then for digital painters, if you're not on a Cintiq, if you're on working with a regular tablet, you have a larger risk of having ulnar nerve issues, because you are literally pressing your elbow, your inner forearm, into your desk for hours on end, and then you wonder why you've got tingling sensations in your fingertips, and then it prevents you from continuing to work. So there's exercises you can do to strengthen your dominant arm, your drawing arm, things like that. Posture, not staring this close to a light box. There's a lot of stuff that goes along with this, but it's just about being conscious and aware of it so that you don't hurt yourself long term.
I had a friend who he was the modeler for StarCraft 2 cinematics, and it was so bad, his ergonomics at work, that, and I'm not speaking about the studio, this is just his personal experience, right? He was so intensively modeling for so long too. If you guys know this cinematic from the game where the Terran Marine steps into this room and he gets outfitted with all the tech armor and everything, it's pretty iconic cinematic. So he modeled a lot of the components in there, and he would come home and he would have to ice his hands for hours because they would just be so sore, right? So, it's something that if he thought a bit more about ergonomics, right, he might have been able to avoid that, but it's kind of too late for him. So yeah, take it seriously. And when you see things that can make your workspace more comfortable for you, don't write it off as, oh, well, that's just for old people, or that's just for sissies or whatever, right? It'll come back to get you. For example, I have these little beanbag things on my desk, right? They're really cool. They're small. They're cheap. You can get them for like $10, and I just put them underneath like Eric was talking about that, ulnar pressure and stuff. I put them underneath pressure points as I'm working and stuff, and it allows me to work a little bit longer. So yeah, it's worth investing in that stuff. I sound like I'm advertising for a beanbag company now.
I think we have time for one more question. I'm so sorry. There are so many questions here. We have one question, and this one is very important, is one of the most common issues that we have amongst students here. And so I know a lot of people will like this. In your careers, how has receiving feedback helped you grow as artists, and how do you translate critique to a positive motivator? Eric, do you want to go first?
So being able to accept constructive criticism, feedback on your art is super important. And you have to have a thick skin when you put your art out there. Everybody's sensitive about their stuff. And if somebody comes along and says, well, your proportions are off, your lighting is this way, and your color scheme is blah, 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 and you go, oh, how dare you? And you respond and you get all angry about it. That's not gonna work out well long-term for a career, because if an art director wants changes on a piece and you fire back with, no, it's perfect as is, then that's the one and only time you will ever work with that client. Some people just want emojis. They just want high five praises and hearts and stuff like that as a response to their work. When they ask for feedback, they don't really want feedback. They want praise. And that's the difference. I think that keeping yourself open to that kind of constructive criticism allows you to hear what people are seeing, that a second pair of eyes, because you might not see what the issues that are wrong with your piece because you've been staring at it for literally hours, hundreds of hours. But if it can translate into a positive motivator, because you can take that criticism and remember, if it's something you're constantly hearing, that it's a deficiency in your work, your proportions are off, your color sense is wrong, your color schemes, blah, 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 whatever it might be, then you can start to say, okay, well, this is something I need to address, because it's clearly more than one person is seeing that issue in my work. So I'm going to go back and fix it. But if your response is, how dare you, and get defensive and fire back at the person just for opening their mouth, then that's not going to help you out long term.
Well said.
I've actually answered that question many times.
Me too. Yeah. You know what? I'll add one maybe kind of funny note is, if you want to get thicker skin, just post on a site like DeviantArt. You get all kinds of wackos commenting on your stuff.
Yeah.
Right. They'll be like, that's dumb. Or like, whatever. Right. Like,
yeah.
Why did you make that? Like, I did a piece where I did a gender bend of the Doom Eternal Marauder, because that game's all just like hyper masculine, steroided out. I was like, well, why don't we have a cool, female demon character, right? And social media people were just like, this is abomination. Why would you make this, right? And I'm just like, I don't care, because I wanted to make it, right? So if you post stuff online, that can be a way to thicken your skin a little bit as an extra tactic there. Yeah.
That's going to be it for today. I don't want to end this because I've been having so much fun. But if you are one of our students and you have asked a question here that has not been answered, please reach out to myself, Tyler, or Eric directly via Slack. We will answer your question. So if you are one of our students, we will help you. Just hop into that community and we'll help you out. For anyone who is not a student and you still have some questions after our webinar today, you can reach out to us at hello@cgspectrum.com and we can point you in the right direction and answer any questions that you might have. And oftentimes they will delegate those questions to me if it's career related or if it's illustration related, Tyler or Eric or one of our other department heads. depending on the question. And so we can help you out. And for anyone else watching the recording, thank you so much for checking this out. And we'd love to hear from you. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment and subscribe to our YouTube page. And we hope to see you in the future. Tyler, Eric, thank you so much for joining me today. I had a blast.
So one last thing I'll say.
Yes, go.
My last final words.
Final words.
An old woman in a life drawing class told me once when I was 20 years old, life is short, art is long. You will always be learning something new and practicing until you die. All right. And nothing worth doing is going to be easy. All right. Because if this was easy, then there would be people like working retail that would just be like, oh yeah, I do that. It's nothing. This is a hard thing. And if you keep practicing, you will get good at it and people will give you money to do it. That's it.
Thank you so much to everyone who joined us today live, who was watching us live. And thank you to everyone who's checking this out later, watching the recording. I love you all so much. Have a great day. Have a great week. And I hope to see some of you watching as our new students in the future. So exciting to add new people to our community every month. See you later. Bye, everyone.